Today, I'm making a video about when you're owning a property, rental properties, dealing with maintenance and repair issues. Now, in my experience, as far as the property owners go, there's three property owners out there. There's the guy that owns investment property that is typically managing his own property. When repairs crop up, he's going and doing his own repairs. That guy will have one or two properties. He's not going to have any more. And he's doing his own repairs and stuff because he just doesn't make enough money off the property, or doesn't do it right, or whatever. So that guy's doomed for failure. Typically, he's going to wear himself out. He thinks he can go do all these things, and maybe he can. Maybe he's a whiz-bang guy. He can just do everything. He's a jack of all trades, a master of none. That guy's going to wear himself out. Now, also, because he's managing his own property, he's got further problems, right? Because now the tenant knows he's the owner, and when the tenant starts playing the violin strings, they got two choices, right? The owner then can say, well, I'm sorry, you owe the rent, I'm just going to do so-and-so. And then they're going to cuss out being called the top 1%, you rich people, blah, 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 blah. So then there's the second guy. The second guy is an investor. He's invested in rental property and hires a property management company to run to manage his properties, but he doesn't want to spend any money. So when things break, he wants to call somebody from Craigslist or TikTok or God only knows what website, Nextdoor, one of these websites. He wants to call them, and he wants to find the guy that'll work as cheap as possible. Now, here's a little insight to somebody who's working really cheap. A person working really cheap can't afford things. And so because they can't afford things, they're probably working multiple jobs all at one time, which means they have very little time to stay on your job or concentrate on your job, show up for your job to begin with, and then they're going to take longer to do it because they're working your job and four more jobs to try to make enough money because they're working too cheap. But they've got your business now because they work cheap. Sounds good to you. They're going to tell you tomorrow, and tomorrow turns into the next day, which turns into a week, which turns into a week and a half before they get there to fix it. And then the time it takes to fix it turns from, I'll have this done in 2 days, I'll have this done tomorrow, into getting it done in a week or so, or whenever. Therein lies the problem. They're working too cheap, so they can't afford to spend the time, effort, energy. The other problem with that person is they don't have any money for licensing, so they're not licensed. They don't have any money for insurance, so they don't have any insurance. They don't have any money for bonding, so they don't have any bond. They don't have anything that they need that's going to protect the property owner and the property management company. Ultimately, when that guy goes in and does work, if he causes any damage at all, you'll never see him again. You're going to pay to have that damage repaired. If he does a repair and causes damage, you're never going to see that guy again. You're going to have to pay for that repair, the next repair. If he goes in and hurts somebody by mistake, you're going to have to pay for that. If he goes in and he gets hurt, you're going to end up paying for that. You're going to get sued. And when you think, oh no, he was working for, it's not going to happen. The city we live in, there's a lawyer on every corner. In fact, the richest personal injury lawyer in the country started here in Jacksonville, has multiple offices here in Jacksonville. He's going to sue you. He's going to take your property. He's going to take everything. He's going to own everything that you now have been playing El Cheapo to try to get it fixed. And the thing is, what typically happens is the person that's not willing to spend any money to fix anything, they're also the person that paid very little to buy the property. So they were buying the most injured properties so they could get them cheap enough. Instead of getting maybe 2 or 3 really nice properties, they buy 10 old properties. And then they pay that cheap guy to go in and get them ready, and he takes forever to get it done, so that by the time they're finally up and ready and running, that property owner, man, he's starving to death because he's been paying a mortgage possibly. Maybe he paid cash, but he's probably paying a mortgage possibly all this time he's been paying for them. He's definitely been paying insurance even if he didn't have a mortgage until this person finally gets all up and running. And this person's not just working on those, he's working on a whole bunch of them, as I said before. So cheap typically winds up costing you the most money, either through lawsuits, liability, damages, shoddy repairs have to be redone twice. The cheaper it is, the more expensive it's going to be. Now there's the third one. The third investor has hired a property manager, just like the second one did, but the third investor lets the property manager especially if they have a lot of expertise, because the property manager actually owns way more properties than you do, as right than you have. And the property manager in this case, um, they know a lot about how to make properties make money, but they also realize that some properties are going to make more money than other properties. Some properties you buy, especially if you buy the old cheapos and they're old and they're constantly needing repairs, they're going to make money, but they're going to make smaller margins. So in that case, I've known people that in that case, they buy a whole bunch of properties with smaller margins so then they make big money, right? A lot of properties with small margins turns into big money. But if you can't afford to buy a whole bunch of properties, then if you want to make big money, you should buy 2 or 3 nice properties that cost the same amount as the 10 or 11 crappy properties that you could buy. Because what happens is you spend all the money in maintenance repairs doing those. But the third guy knows this. So when he goes in, what he does is he says to himself, I know I got to escrow some money for when rainy days happen. And I know I need to spend some money, and I'm going to let the property manager handle that. And there's going to be some months where I don't put anything in the bank, and there's going to be other months where I do put money in the bank. It's all about an annual average. Now, if you've hired LRM, which is Lynn Realty and Management, and you're the second guy, and you're going to pinch pennies and you're going to do things the cheap way, we're going to manage your property, but we're going to let you manage the repairs. We're going to call you when everything goes bad, and then you can supply the guy to get them done. And then when they have to be redone or whatever, we'll be there. We'll collect our management fees for making sure that people get called. We'll make sure that the guy does it, but we're not going to vet it. We have a client that actually one time, it was the guy that hired the cheapo, and what happened to him was he ends up hiring this handyman guy that wasn't vetted, that didn't have any insurance and wasn't licensed. The guy goes in to do some work on an apartment and winds up damaging some other stuff in the apartment, and the repairs he did actually caused further damage. Couldn't get that guy anymore. That handyman was non-existent, wouldn't return phone calls, wouldn't come back and do anything. So another person had to be hired and paid in order to go back and do it. And the second person that was hired was also an El Cheapo. And when that person went in there, they did the same thing. They did some damage, not as much, but they did some damage, and they had to go out of there. And the woman that was in there with her 2 kids later found out, because the guy was talking to him like, hey, how you doing? You having a good day? I'm here to fix this problem, whatever. And she found out that the guy was on the sexual predator registry and shouldn't have been around children at all. So what do you think happened to the management company and the property owner? Well, what happened was the management company gets calls as, hey, you allowed a sexual predator into my house with my kids. The management company said, I didn't do that. The property owner did that. He's the one that selected who was going to do it because he didn't bother to vet them. They were just cheap. The third guy doesn't have that problem. The third guy relies on the expertise of his property manager. The third guy knows that his property manager is going to make sure they're licensed and insured, and if they have to have permitted work done, it's going to be permitted. They're going to make sure they don't have sexual predators because they're hiring a company to go do it that already does background checks and screenings, right? And because of that, the third guy can rest easy at night, can go on vacations, and he's making a little bit of money versus the second guy who's making more money in the front end and spending it on the back end. And he's actually losing money. The third guy is making money, although a little bit. The second guy is losing money. The first guy is wore out. He dies of a heart attack in under somebody's sink. Anyway, that's the 3 people that you have that get into real estate. And that's how proper property management is done. You recommend to your client that they get these repairs done by a licensed, insured, even bonded company that has licensed HVAC, licensed electricians, licensed people. So when they go in and do it, you know the job is done right. It's not going to cause damage, but if it does, they have insurance to cover that. And that's the only way to do it. Anybody that falls short of that is going to get a property manager that's just going to collect the rent and disperse the rent, make a few phone calls when something happens, and you're going to have unhappy tenants. Code enforcement's you're going to get to know them personally, and worse, you'll suffer from something I called in other videos, microphone disease. And in Jacksonville, Florida, there's been so many stories done by News4JAX and the NBC affiliate here, They're all over this. They used to have a guy that was Ken Amaro did this segment all the time. And they love this stuff. It makes great ratings. If they can go out and find these slumlords, I love this stuff. And in Jacksonville, we have a slumlord. We have this what they call the slumlord law or slumlord ordinance, and they've connect all the properties together for somebody who owns one. So if something happens to this property, they'll inspect all of them. Code enforcement. And those guys ain't going to play. They put a citation on you. Good luck. But that's the first guy. And the second guy, the third guy has all the protections in the world because he's hired a professional company to go out and do a professional job. He makes a little bit less money on their properties, may only make a little bit of money on the properties, but he can sleep well at night, knowing that he's not harming people, not going to have lawsuits, not going to have go to jail or whatever happens. Who knows, But anyway, I hope that helps somebody out there.